It's lovely to be here tonight. I feel self-conscious with the timer here, like I've wasted 5 seconds saying that. But no, it is lovely to be here. And they emailed me about 3 weeks ago to tell me the topic, which was one simple rule. And I was trying to sort of rack my brains to think, what was this rule that I was going to speak about? And the rule that really came to me, the one rule that's really stuck with me for the years is, as a writer, I was told, sort of age 17, to write what you know. And this was told to me by a very lovely woman called Serena, who ran a production company in London. She gave me my first job as a reader, where you sort of have a pile of unsolicited manuscripts and you sort of work your way through them. And for all the writers that send in their projects to people, yeah, it was the 17-year-old me writing notes on them. But so anyway, I was reading them, and she said to me, you've got to write what you know, Tom. That's the most important advice I can give you. And at the time, she had just had this show commissioned, which was about car mechanics called Grease Monkeys. I don't know if that phrase is a UK phrase called Grease. Anyway, it's Grease Monkeys. And she was like, this is an example of a show. It's got commissioned. It's on the BBC. And I thought to myself, okay, so I have to imitate that. I have to write what I know, Grease Monkeys. And I came up with the first series I came up with was about a sandwich shop. And I've actually never run a sandwich shop, but I figured who would know? You don't know that. Look at me. I might have run a sandwich shop. And I figured, car mechanic sandwich shop, that was kind of, that was my version of it. And it was, the cliffhanger, I don't know, we ran out of sandwich filling or something. It was, needless to say, a total disaster. Never went anywhere and disappeared into sort of oblivion. And so I'm just sort of curious how that writer, the sandwich shop writer, ended up writing about Stalinist Russia. Now, you might not have guessed that whether I have or hadn't run a sandwich shop, but I'm pretty sure you all know that I didn't live under Stalinist Russia. So the sense of how did I get to that point? And now I was thinking about this sort of speech a couple of weeks ago before I was banned in Russia. And so suddenly events have sort of crossed over this slightly. And that question, which is, why are you writing about Stalinist Russia, has now been asked by the Minister of Culture, and this guy called Vladimir. And he really doesn't like me very much and thinks I shouldn't be writing about Stalinist Russia. And suddenly my Twitter feed, which was minimal anyway, but anyway, it suddenly exploded for me, like 10 people, all Russian, and all writing, some of them writing in Russian, and some of them sort of, you can see it's angry Russian. And I think if I translated it, which I haven't, it was like, stick to your sandwich show. And this sense of, why am I writing about Stalinist Russia? And maybe, there was a sense, you're this Westerner, what do you know about it? And so I was trying to go back to the impulse, this early impulse that drew me into the story. I don't know whether you know anything about the story of the book Child 44 is based on a real investigation. Andrei Chikatilo killer. And I was trying to work out, now I have lots of answers when people say, why did you write about Stalinist Russia? One was that I went there, not Stalinist Russia, I went to Russia when I was 17. It's a good story to tell to a journalist because it looks like you were there, you experienced it, that was the inspiration. But that isn't really, I think, the impulse that drew me in. I was trying to work out why I've written this book about paranoia, about fear of being exposed, fear of the state, having a facade. And I realized actually the energy that I was drawing on was growing up and being gay and convinced that I would suffer career destruction if I was exposed, that I would suffer some sort of repercussion. Now, when I grew up, which is sort of in the 80s at school, the UK government passed a law that made it illegal for teachers to talk about what they claimed was promote homosexuality. And this included mentioning some of the iconic English literature texts, such as Edward II. So I had a teacher who deliberately taught that in class, and it was this act of sort of rebellion against the state. And there's a character in Child 44, Raisa, played by Noomi Rapace, very lovely Noomi Rapace, and she teaches banned books as well, and now the fictional character is now part of a banned work of fiction, which is kind of an interesting connection. But I was like, oh, so I kind of, in a sense, the weird thing is I took Serena's advice and I was like, write what you know. It doesn't always have to be this literal sense. You can take this energy and push it through a different story. And so I figured, this is it. I figured out the answer. Write what you know. It doesn't have to be literal. It can be, you just take that energy, push it through something. Okay, that's fine. I figured I've got it. I've got the answer. I'm going to continue doing this because my life, quite frankly, is not much more interesting than sandwich shops. In fact, sandwich shops is probably more interesting. So I was like, I got the answer, it's fine. And then suddenly, 4 years ago, I got a call from my dad. My parents had retired to a farm in Sweden. My mum's Swedish, my dad's English. I'm sitting in London, and I feel like I'm writing. I'm in a secure place in my knowledge of writing. And my dad says, Tom, you have to come out to Sweden. Your mum is very ill. She's been admitted to a psychiatric hospital. And this came completely out of the blue. I didn't know anything about that my mum might be ill. I was surprised. I said, of course. I booked a ticket to Sweden. Now, before I could take that flight to Sweden, I got a second call, and this one was from my mum. And she said that my dad was lying. She was perfectly sane. He was using the allegation of insanity to cover up his own criminal activities. And she said, it would be funny were it not true. And it does, I mean, it has this sense of, you know, you tell it as this sense, there's an absurdity to it. But I was like, my mum sounds lucid, so I was like, Mum, what do you want me to do? She says she's going to fly to London and she's going to tell me the truth. And so I'm like, okay, I will wait at Heathrow Airport, rip up my ticket, I'm not coming to Sweden. And I wait for my mum at the airport. And she, went via Copenhagen. It was this very complicated route. I don't know why it was such a complicated route, but she arrived at Heathrow Airport. And she looked like my mum. She'd lost a bit of weight, but she didn't behave particularly oddly. She said, I don't want to tell you the story here in the airport. I want you to take me back to my apartment, and I'm going to tell you what really happened in Sweden. And so I was like, okay, Mum, I'll do that. We went back to my apartment, and she spoke to me for about 4 hours. Now, my mum is quite a modest person. She would never dominate a dinner table conversation, for example. And that night, she spoke. I interrupted occasionally, but she spoke for about 4 hours nonstop about telling me about the events that happened in Sweden that involved my dad. And she was a brilliant storyteller. I was convinced in the sense that I did not know what was true. I thought I would know instantly. I thought I'd know my mum is suffering from some kind of psychosis. It would be absurd. I would get help. But she told me the story, and I thought, I really don't know whether my dad has done these things or not, or whether my mum is ill. And so suddenly I was faced with this conflict, and my mum asked me for one thing. She said, Tom, I've never asked you for anything in your life, and that's true. You know, trivial stuff, yes, but never anything really big. But she said, tonight I'm going to ask you one thing, which is for you to believe me. And I, in the end, didn't believe her, and I took her to a doctor, and she got help. And I was sort of racked by guilt at that decision, not because it was the wrong decision, it was the right decision, but it felt like a colossal betrayal. And so suddenly I was faced with, what is writing about? And I thought, I want to write a book about this event, and I want to address the central question, which is that it's true I didn't believe that night, but I did believe it was important in some way. And I did believe that I had something to say about it in terms of relationships and in terms of believing people. So, write what you know. Suddenly, writing what I know was a very literal sense. It was drawing from a real experience and turning it into something. And so then we come back. How old am I now? I'm 36. I had this piece of advice when I was 18, write what you know. Simple rule, write what you know. And I think to myself, what does that mean? And I realize what it means is I don't know what I know. I don't know where that rule is going to take me. But I do think it is an interesting rule. And I do think that it's the one rule that I keep thinking about constantly. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you tonight. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much.